In 1818, a German banker sent his 5 sons to 5 different cities with one instruction: never let outsiders see the whole picture. 200 years later, that family, the Rothschilds, is still wealthy. Meanwhile, Cornelius Vanderbilt built the largest fortune in American history, worth more than the entire U.S. Treasury at the time. By 1973, when 120 of his descendants gathered for a family reunion, not one of them was a millionaire. Same country, same century, same access to banks, lawyers, and opportunity. One family engineered a system that outlived empires. The other built a fortune that couldn't survive a single lifetime after the founder died. And by the end of this video, you'll understand the exact mechanism that decided which path each family took, because it's still sitting in plain sight today. And almost nobody who isn't already rich knows it exists. You've probably heard the number. Roughly 70% of wealthy families lose their fortune by the second generation, and nearly 90% by the third. What you probably haven't heard is that this isn't an American pattern. In China, the exact same phenomenon has its own proverb. Centuries old, Fu Bu Guo Sandai. Wealth does not survive 3 generations. 2 civilizations, thousands of miles apart, no contact with each other's legal systems, and they arrived at the identical conclusion. That's your first clue. This isn't about culture or bad luck. It's math. Wealth, left alone, doesn't grow. It gets divided. A fortune split between 4 children becomes 4 smaller fortunes. Those 4, split between their own children, become 16 even smaller ones. Do that math over a century and a billion-dollar estate quietly turns into a collection of comfortable, unremarkable bank accounts. The families who stayed rich for 100 years didn't outsmart this math. They refused to let the math apply to them at all. And here's exactly how. Before there were trusts or tax lawyers, there was a much simpler tool, and it's the one almost nobody mentions: marriage. Mayer Rothschild had 5 sons and 5 daughters. The sons ran banks in 5 different cities. The daughters, by long-standing family practice, largely married their own first and second cousins. For roughly the first 50 years of the dynasty, wealth that would normally have exited the family through a daughter's marriage instead stayed circulating entirely inside it. It sounds almost medieval, and it was. But strip away the discomfort and look at the mechanism. Every dowry, every inheritance, every business alliance stayed locked inside one bloodline instead of leaking out into 5 unrelated families. Modern dynasties don't arrange marriages anymore, but they solved the exact same leakage problem with a tool that's still legal in nearly every country on Earth. The prenuptial agreement tied to a trust. Same goal, different century. Here's a detail most finance channels leave out entirely. In 1815, news of Britain's victory at the Battle of Waterloo took days to reach London through official channels. The Rothschild family's private courier and pigeon network got the news first and acted on it in the London markets before the official messengers even arrived. Historians still debate exactly how much this single event built the family fortune. But the underlying principle is undisputed and far more important than the myth. The Rothschilds treated private information infrastructure as a core family asset, generations before anyone used the word insider the way we do today. That instinct, build your own private pipeline of information and never depend entirely on public channels, shows up again and again in dynasties that survive. It's the ancestor of the modern family office's research desk. Now here's where it gets structural. In several U.S. states, South Dakota, Nevada, Delaware among them, you can legally create a trust that lasts not for 1 generation, not for 2, but effectively forever. It's called a dynasty trust, and it works by never actually transferring ownership of an asset to any individual heir. The trust owns the asset permanently. Each generation simply receives the income it produces. Because no single heir ever legally owns the underlying wealth, it can't be divided in a divorce, seized in a lawsuit, or taxed every time it passes to the next generation. There's an even more precise version of this called a generation-skipping trust, deliberately structured to jump straight past the children to the grandchildren, legally avoiding an entire extra layer of estate, tax that would otherwise be triggered at the parents' generation. The Walton family kept the bulk of Walmart's stock inside structures like these, rather than in individual hands, which is a large part of why, decades after Sam Walton's death, his descendants remain among the richest people on Earth rather than a scattered group of moderately wealthy relatives. The next tool sounds almost too simple to be real, and tax professionals openly call it by this exact nickname: buy, borrow, die. Step 1. Buy appreciating assets, real estate, stock, businesses. Step 2. Instead of ever selling those assets to fund a lifestyle, borrow against them. Loans aren't income, so they aren't taxed. Step 3. When the asset holder dies, the assets receive what's called a stepped-up basis, meaning their value resets for tax purposes to whatever they're worth at death. Decades of growth become, in the eyes of the tax code, as if they never happened. The heirs inherit the asset and pay little to nothing on gains their parents spent a lifetime building. This single mechanism is a major reason billionaires can show almost no taxable income year after year, while their net worth climbs into the tens of billions. By the early 1900s, John D. Rockefeller, at the time the richest man who had ever lived, created something that had never existed before, a private company whose only client was his own family. It managed investments, paid household staff, handled taxes, and trained the next generation before they ever touched a cent of it. Historians consider it the first modern family office. But here's the detail almost nobody knows. Rockefeller made his own children keep handwritten ledgers of every penny of allowance from an early age, paid them small sums for chores rather than giving money freely, and required them to give a portion to charity, not out of frugality, but as deliberate training. The family office managed the money. The ledger book trained the mind that would one day inherit it. Here's something almost no one talks about. Mars, the company behind M&M's, Snickers, and Pedigree, has been owned by a single family since 1911. It has never sold shares on a public stock exchange. Neither has Cargill, one of the largest privately held companies on the planet. Both families reportedly hold private family assemblies, structured meetings, where dozens of relatives across generations review the business together, sometimes governed by a written family constitution most outsiders will never see. Going public means selling ownership to strangers, and strangers dilute control exactly the way heirs dilute inheritance. The families who stayed rich for a century made a quiet decision. The public rarely notices. Keep the company private, keep the governance internal, and let outsiders buy the products, never the company. Here's the twist. Every tool we just described, marriage strategy, private information networks, trusts, borrowing strategies, family offices, private ownership, can be copied. Lawyers write these documents every day. So why do 90% of families still lose everything by Generation 3? Because wealth was handed to heirs who were never taught how to think about it. The Rothschilds didn't just protect assets. They trained sons from childhood in banking, negotiation, and discretion before handing them any real responsibility. Rockefeller's ledger books weren't about the money in them. They were rehearsal for the money that was coming. That's the uncomfortable truth hiding underneath all the legal architecture. The paperwork buys you decades. The mindset is what buys you centuries. So the next time someone tells you the rich just got lucky, remember the Vanderbilts and the Rothschilds started in the same century, in the same world, with fortunes that dwarfed almost everyone else alive at the time. One dissolved within 60 years. The other is still standing 200 years later, and used almost none of the tools most people assume separate the rich from everyone else. It used all of them: marriage, information, trusts, tax mechanics, governance, and training, stacked together, generation after generation. The tools in this video are legal, Most of them are public record. The only thing standing between you and using them isn't access. It's knowing they exist in the first place. And now you do.